And let's just start with what our goals and intentions are for today's call. And that's really just to understand ways that we can lay out our Nifty projects in our workspace to make sure it's working in our best interest. From there, we're going to cover kind of the rewards of doing this in Nifty, kind of how the tool is built to reward you for building a workflow that's scalable starting on the ground floor. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to use that Q&A box. And I'm just going to kind of go through what I have planned, and then we'll address any questions from there. Just to be clear, any questions I'm answering are going to be oriented less around product roadmap and more so about how things work in Nifty today. So from a broad level, Nifty, this is our workspace. This is everything that's pertaining to this one workspace. And a workspace has unique projects with unique users and unique data, and all has its own subscription. So you can be part of multiple workspaces, but everything in one workspace is kind of saved for that one workspace. Now from there, we have kind of a sub level of categorization called portfolios. In fact, by default, you have something called the general portfolio. And the general portfolio is going to automatically invite all of the members of your team into that portfolio. From there, you can create custom portfolios. So all these ones we're looking at here, client services, development, these are all portfolios that have been created custom after the fact, and we'll do that right down here. In fact, let's create one right now. We'll call it the webinar portfolio. Let's make sure we get our typing done correctly. And I'm going to just invite everyone on my team just to get some faces in the crowd here in the project. So we'll see that now that we've created this portfolio, all of the avatars of whoever I've invited to this project can be seen here. That's not the case with all of our portfolios. In fact, we have some with limited members. Being part of a portfolio automatically invites you to all the projects within that portfolio. So these 4 members are automatically part of all these projects. You can invite members of your team to individual projects as well without giving them broad portfolio access. So if you just need to give someone access to 1 or 2 projects within a portfolio that they otherwise don't need to be a part of, you can do that, no problem. Now, in this case, we invited everyone into this portfolio. So let's create our first project. And let's just say this is a client website. We're going to build out a project for our client. And this doesn't have to be a website. This is just really this one's going to be focused on kind of a head to toe flow, the beginning of the engagement, the meat of the engagement, and then kind of the closeout. So every project in Nifty by default has 6 modules: home, milestone, tasks, discussions, docs, and files. Any one of these modules can be disabled on a per project basis, so we can really control what exactly this project should have in it. So you might have some that are just a discussion channel for maybe you and your team. Great way to use that general portfolio is to kind of create a team level chat, right? Maybe you have one that's just docs and files if you need some of a kind of a repository project. This one, we're going to leave everything on. And we're going to start with milestones on this project. Most projects typically start somewhere between milestones and tasks because this is where we're going to lay out where we're going with this project. Milestones are the big picture phases of this project, kind of where we're going and by when. So we'll start with something like onboarding. This is maybe we've won this client job and now we're going to get them working with us. And you can put your start and end dates in here. I'm just going to drag and drop because I'm not overly worried about dates. I kind of just want to visualize this. So I'm going to drag this out to here. And that's our first milestone. After milestone 1, we might have something, if we're doing like a website here, we might have a design phase. Call it implementation. That way it's, if you're not doing a website, if you're doing interior design, any sort of design that needs to be implemented, we can do that. And then we'll do kind of a project closeout. So one thing we can notice here is that milestones are automatically going to order themselves based on the start date. So you can see how these kind of jockey in position based on where I'm going to drag this one. So this one's going to go at the very bottom because I'm dragging it down. So this is kind of like a waterfall shape. You don't have to have this kind of shape in your project. This is a very linear kind of waterfall, I think is the phrase a lot of people use here. A lot of people will have multiple milestones running in tandem. That's okay too. Another thing I'm going to do here is, and we'll see why, but I'm going to put what are called dependencies in. And you can actually do this when you're creating the milestone, but I'm going to say, I don't want to be able to start anything in my design project until I'm finished with my onboarding. And then we can see a little arrow drop down here, and we'll see what these arrows do a bit later, but I'm going to put this implementation on design and close out. We're going to put on our implementation. So now it stands to reason that when we're finished with onboarding, we can start design, after design implementation, and then close out. So we kind of have the frame of our project, where we're going and by when. We plan to have everything wrapped up by mid, almost late February here. Sound good? So next we're gonna bring some tasks into the picture here. And there's a bunch of different ways we could do this. As I mentioned before, you can start from the task screen, but from here, we're going to do it from milestones. So I'm actually going to open this up and I'm going to say onboarding. We want to have a kickoff call, and then we're going to have kind of maybe a scope review. This is just so we make sure everything is as we planned it to be. Now we're going to notice that when I'm adding tasks into a milestone, it's automatically going to pick up the due date of the milestone. Let me see if I can zoom in here. This one's Jan 30. And that's when this milestone ends. So when we have a milestone, we're telling Nifty that none of the tasks in this milestone can be due before or after the date parameters of this milestone. So what Nifty's really doing here is kind of giving you a last minute deadline for these tasks. We can change these. Maybe this kickoff call is going to be due a lot earlier. We're going to say this is actually due January 15th. So we'll put that a little bit earlier in, all right, we'll get back to what just happened there. So I'm going to say this one's actually due. We're going to make it a little bit later. We'll say it's January 21st. What Nifty was just telling me there on that pop-up was you actually picked a date range outside of the parameters of this milestone. Would you like to adjust the milestone to have it fit? So that's why we got that little pop-up. So we have the kickoff call and onboarding. So these are the two tasks in our onboarding phase, which is our onboarding milestone. Design, we might have, UX, UI, and logo. So we can see these are all going to come in. Again, they're picking up the due date of this milestone. I'm not going to get too hung up on the due dates for the sake of today's presentation, but you might want to go in and kind of note this. Another thing we should note now, we'll address this in a minute, but these are all tasks are all going into a list. It's going into the to-do list, and we'll see why in a minute. Implementation, we might have development, and maybe we'll just say test, high level testing. Closeout, we're going to have client review and sign off. So this is a pretty lean project right now. Not a whole lot of tasks, but we can see now we have 2 tasks in this first phase, 3 in the next, 2 in the next milestone, and 1 in the final. But another thing we've noticed is that when I've added these tasks into these milestones, we're getting these little padlocks on them. They're locked. We can edit this task, but we can't complete it. And that's because of this dependency. That's saying we can't finish anything in this milestone until we've finished everything in onboarding. And so this is where it's really cool. You can say, once we've had our kickoff call, I can go in and check it off, and we'll see in real time, this is going to light up. And this is where 50% the way through this milestone. That is to say that we have 1 open task and now 1 completed task. So we're halfway done. And when it's full way done, we'll be able to start the design milestone. So I'm going to kind of pause this milestone screen right now, because now we've really framed out where we're going. We've put the tasks in the individual phases, and now we've started to see these phases automate with progress reporting in real time based on the task completion. Well, when I say complete a task, what I'm really saying is we hit this tick box, and that's telling the task that it's done. Let's look at our task screen to get a better sense of what's going on. We have 4 different views. Actually, one of these views we'll touch on a little bit later. It's kind of a hybrid view between milestones and tasks. But I'm actually going to flip over to our Kanban view here, just because I think it'll be a little bit easier to visualize what's going on. So everything we've created is in this to-do list. And to be clear, the reason why everything's in to-do isn't because it's named to-do. See, when we add tasks from the milestone screen, those tasks are automatically going to file to our furthest left list on the task board. So that this was called to do was just what the project named it coming out of the gate. You might name this something completely different. Say needs to be done or something even more different. So this is where we're starting to talk about tasks and our task board, particularly our task lists. Right now we have one task list and we kind of have two, because what Nifty does is by default, it hides our completed lists, but this one we see is highlighted green, and that's an automation offered by Nifty out of the box. So when I hit that tick box, it's jumping that task over, right? So even if I did it from milestones, and now we can see this milestone is complete because we've completed both of the tasks in it, it's really relocating this, and we see that list name changed to completed. But we can have more task lists. So maybe we actually want some other ones. We want needs to be done. We think that's to do, so we can say in progress. And maybe we'll even have a review. So we have to do, in progress, and review. This is a popular way task lists, especially Kanban boards, are used, because now we can start to proactively give information, right? Like, because the point of project management tools aren't just to organize, but it's to proactively communicate. So we don't need to do that over email or Messenger, whatever, and say, have you done this? Where do we stand? It's so these answers can be found autonomously, which is very important, especially in the remote or hybrid work era. So we can say, UX is in progress and UI is in progress. Actually, let's go ahead and assign these tasks to some people. So I'm going to say Angie is let's say Angie's our designer. Let's say David's our logo designer, and development and testing, we'll give those to Emily. She is our developer. So now we've given these tasks to specific people. And as we move these tasks across different lists, all this task movement is going to be tracked by our task activity log. This is just a system message saying what was done to this task and when. So we can see now that we've started to move this and we have a little bit of a flow going. Well, let's talk about what it's like to work with a client in Nifty. This project, after all, is a client project. Not all projects need to be client. Maybe none of them are going to be client projects for you, but let's just talk about what that's like. And we're going to use this guest role. What I just did was go to the invite members to this project button within our project. I'm going to go to the guest role, and we have someone aptly named the guest ready to go here. And so the guest is now part of our project. There's the guest. Guests are not part of our team. They're not part of our workspace. And so what I mean by that is that we can't actually add them to an entire portfolio. If we use Team Chat, we can't direct message our guests because they're not part of the team. They're just added to this specific project. So they won't even see the name of the project that they're a part of in Nifty. And there's a whole lot more controls we can have. We can actually hide information from our guests, tasks, milestones, and task lists. I'm not going to get too far into that today, unless maybe that's some of the questions that pop up later. But this is important because what we can have is like an internal review. Maybe as the manager, I want to see everything that goes on before we move it over to the guest. And then we might add something like guest, or let's call them a client in this case, client review. So this is just so we can make sure all of our steps along the way our client is involved in and they can give feedback. And we're actually going to assign them to this list. So this is a second major automation in Nifty, because now I can say UX is in review by me. I can leave any tasks or thoughts on this task, looks great. And I can move this along to the client, who's automatically going to get added to the task as well. Being added to a task is going to send you a browser, email, mobile, or desktop notification up to your choosing. Everyone can customize that for themselves in their notification settings. Okay, so the client likes it. Client says the client's going to come in and approve that task, because clients can create, assign, be assigned, and complete tasks. Kind of a meaningful collaboration role in Nifty. So they've completed that. And we're going to say UI, we're going to go down our funnel here, make sure everyone is picking up this approval along the way. And that is ready for our client to review as well. Now, Like we said before, we can actually see these task lists here in our milestones. So we can go ahead and move these across our milestones from this view as well. So if you really like this timeline view, you can manage a lot from it. If I want to say, instead of need to be done, I want to move the logo to in progress. And we'll see, even if I move this into review, I'm assigned to it because I'm assigned to that task list if we would go into the task level, right? One more meaningful thing we should know about our collaboration with really anyone in the project is that it does not end here. In fact, it only begins. We have a built-in discussion channel. So you can even start a Zoom call in here. All you need is one Zoom account for the entire workspace. Doesn't even need to be a paid Zoom account. And we can have conversations with everyone in this project. We can have chat conversations with members of this project. In fact, we can even cite tasks. So if I want to click on this little ID here, we can also see it if I open the task right here. Click on it and we can say, let's have a meeting to discuss branding. And I'm going to cite that task just so everyone can know that that's what we're talking about. We also have a built-in document at Nifty. We have built-in docs. We have our own docs, and we have a two-way integration with Google Docs, spreadsheets, and presentations. So if you are a user or want to be a user of the Google Suite, you can use that alongside, dare I say, actually inside of Nifty. And lastly, any of the files that we're going to bring up into this project, those designs that we're working on, part of the UX and UI phase that we attach to tasks, drop in discussions, all of that's going to aggregate here in the file section of a project. But we're really focused on building out this layout, right? Because I think it's important once you get something you like, a methodology that works for you, or at least a place to start off of, you can always evolve from there. So let's say, look, this is a great way to work with clients when we build our websites, or if you do interior decorating or consulting or any client arrangement you do. Well, what we can do there is go ahead and save this as a template. So we can say, this is my client website flow 1. Website for clients. That's our template description. We can choose what in this workflow we want to preserve. So we might say, look, I might have different members the next time I do this. I might have a different portfolio even. So I don't want to necessarily save the people involved here, but I do want to save the milestones, task lists, and tasks, really the meat of our collaboration here. And so that way, when I want to create this project in the future, instead of having to build it from scratch, I can work off of this template. It's going to use the day you create it as the start date. So even if it's 3 months from now, this new templated project won't start in January. It'll start in March or April, 3 months from now. So this was just one way to lay out a project. I'm actually going to go through a different way, kind of building off of what we know now. So we're going to add a new project to this portfolio. This one we're going to call product development. Maybe you don't work with guests, or maybe you don't even you want to bring clients in to your workspace. We're going to talk about a different way to lay this out. And we're actually going to start with tasks first in this one. And instead of doing to do and progress review complete, we're going to build this slightly differently. I'm going to say to do, I'm going to put in another one. I'm going to say backlog. This is maybe a bunch of ideas of tasks or features in a product that we're building that we know we want to have. We don't necessarily know when. So we're going to say, for example, mobile login. I'm just going to churn out a bunch of what sound like features. Mobile login, we might have mobile avatar change, mobile log out. To be clear, Nifty is great for Scrum, Agile, and any other type of workflows. We actually looked at kind of a waterfall earlier. We're going to talk about web login. I'll just drop a few more of these because I want to show you a different way this can be done. We have web login, and we're going to say we have web main screen. Okay, so now we have a bunch of tasks. And actually, let's build out a few more task lists. We're going to say, instead of to do, let's say this is design. And instead of design, we're going to say, or we're going to create a new list that says development. Maybe a really simple product flow with our designers and developers in the same project. And then we're going to say QA. This is like a test. QA, quality assurance for anyone who's not in the know. This is maybe how we're going to test our code. And then from there, it's going to go live. Okay. So we have a way of building out this project accordingly. Okay. So we don't have any milestones yet, right? And it's not too late. What we saw before was the ability to build out milestones and add tasks to them. But we're going to do this one a little bit differently. I'm going to say these are sprints. This is sprint 1. Or I kind of like, everyone does it differently. I know some companies will give each sprint its own name. I like to say this is sprint. It's the month of 1. It's the second sprint, and it's the year 21. So I typically do like 1, 2, 21. And then since it's halfway through the month, next month will be 2, 1, 22, 2, 2, 22. No right or wrong way to do it. Just one way of thinking about it. Okay. So that's sprint 1. Let's put down sprint 2 for now. Okay. So now we have 2 sprints. Now that I went through my esoteric sprint naming process, I completely avoided it. All right, so we're gonna go back to tasks, because as we know, we can complete these tasks, we can assign them, we can do whatever we'd like, but these tasks aren't gonna propel any milestones, right? Because they're not tied to any milestones. So I can complete all of these, but these milestones won't light up, because you can see there's no way of knowing that there's a connection between these two. So what I'm actually gonna do is jump to list view. Because what I can do is say, I want these 3 tasks to be, and I'm holding down shift here, I want these to be tied to sprint 1. And so kind of did this backwards. Remember I said at the beginning, you can start on tasks or milestones, no wrong way to do it. Well, now I've retroactively gone and we can go check this out and see now there's 3 open tasks. And these are the tasks we just assigned to it through bulk actions in our task list. But I want to look at another view called Swimlane view. And Swimlane view, like I mentioned before, is a hybrid task and milestone view. You can actually access this view from either your milestone or task screen. And I think it's kind of the secret weapon of Nifty in some ways. So what we have here is, I'm just going to collapse our sidebar. We have our sprint 1 milestone. So these are our milestones on the left-hand side, right? And I can even put in a new one. So we'll go back to our methodology. I'll say 2, 2, 21. And that's here. That one jumped in front because I didn't give it the dates, because I just tend to drag these. But if you would put those dates in at the start and end dates, you could have this flow going, right? So I'm going to go back here and we see now we have sprint 1, 2, and sprint 3. And maybe what I want to do is, here are all the features I know I want. I just don't know necessarily when I want them. So I can kind of create this backlog without a milestone. Then I can say, you know what, I actually want to make this one part of sprint 1. And you'll see this as 1 more. So that actually, that makes it a little bit neater if you don't want this to expand on your own, but you can click on that to expand it. And then because of that, I'm going to move the web login into sprint 2. So now I can start to shuffle these tasks across my different sprints as it makes sense, right? Now I've just put this one 2 sprints in advance. And to be clear, I'm just using the word sprint, but what I really mean is milestone. These are our milestones. But what this also allows me to do is drop tasks strategically into our different lists here, right? So maybe in sprint 1, I want development to start doing tech stack research. I want my developers to start telling me how we're going to build this website. And then I want design. I want a mood board. I want to get some moods going. I want to know how this feels. And then logo concepts. And we'll actually put that one in the next sprint. So we'll say logo concepts. And so now you can see I'm strategically placing tasks into milestones and lists at the same time, kind of that intersection, what have you, between the two. So that's one of the beautiful things about this screen. And then let's go ahead and use that QA flow. That's what we're going to assign to our QA engineer. We'll say Carlos is our QA engineer. So anything from development that's going to enter QA, does he like our tech stack? He's going to be assigned to it, and he can come in and weigh in on whether or not to do that. And if we complete that, we can actually see every milestone is going to have its own completed list. So it's another great way to kind of parse out your completed lists segmented by milestone. And we can see this milestone light up because now we're starting to see that progress. It's that same timeline view, just in a different way of viewing it. Similarly, it's those we've strategically placed these, right? Rather than having to necessarily have them start in the left-hand side and move them accordingly. So these are a couple different thoughts on how to approach from a ground level, how to approach every project. Do I want to strategically place tasks into milestones and task lists at the same time? Do I want to drop down milestones, then throw all my tasks in there with being totally fine with them ending up in the left-hand column? And then we have a question here, are milestones required for every project? They're not. You can turn off milestones and just leave tasks. Commonly used for something like if you wanted to have a project intake. For example, if you have a Zapier, a web form hooked up to Zapier, and you have someone fill out that form, and it's going to create a task in this project where you can see I only have tasks and I have myself assigned to the list. So when Zapier spits that task out into this list, I'm automatically assigned to it. I can actually move this task to a completely different project if I want. Move task, and I can move this to any other project that I'm a part of in this workspace. Another question I have right now is using Zapier, is it possible to assign a project to a specific portfolio and person? Yes and no. You can control where that task is going to go. I believe you can even launch a template from that task through Zapier with our Zapier integration. The no comes in that no one's technically assigned a project. You can create a project that everyone in that portfolio is going to be automatically added to. So if you see that as assigned, then yeah, I guess yes and yes. I guess I'm just trying to be a little precise on that vernacular, but I hope those make sense. I see a little bit longer question here. I'm going to come to that one a little bit later, just because I'm in the flow of things right now. So Sky, why are we doing all this other than creating templates and making it really scalable to go about my workday? Well, that's really the answer, because as you can see, I'm part of a bunch of different projects across a bunch of different portfolios. And while we've created a really organized way on a per project basis, if you are part of a lot of projects, going to each of these on a per day basis might be a bit much, right? And here's the ones we were just working on down here, webinar. What I want to just do really quickly is to make sure we have some people assigned to these. So I'm going to give the backlog. We'll give these to David. And so he's automatically going to be assigned to these. Designer, right? This is another way we can use these. The designer, Emily is my designer, so she's automatically added to these. Developer, I think we already said Emily was a developer. We're changing roles. We have a really talented team here. So we're moving things around. Okay, so why are we doing this? Because it's a scalable way to approach our workflow on the project level, but we also want to be able to scalably see what's going on across all of our projects. And that's where the tools up here come into play. Starting with overview. So we went through and we built out all of these milestones on our projects. And these milestones are kind of broken out into individual phases. That is, if you made milestones, as we noted earlier, that you don't necessarily have to. But if we went and built out milestones just so we can have a big picture understanding of where we're going, going to communicate internally or to clients or to stakeholders in the organization, well, now we can get a kind of master Gantt of all of our projects. So to be clear, each of these are a project that we'll see in my sidebar here. These are all individual projects. We're pretty healthy right now. Here's one that's not quite done, but we're on schedule. We don't have any that are brutally overdue. But what I can actually do is go ahead and filter this by portfolio. So here's the webinar portfolio. Here's what we just made today. And here are our 2 projects. And these are calculated based on the overall milestone percentage. So every milestone has its own percentage. Well, the overview is going to roll that up one level higher. So where's our client website? It's 38% the way done, and it's going to be finished February 4th. Product development happens to have the same due date, and we're 13% the way done. Well, now we can roll this down even further. And now here's that milestone screen that we just made on our project level, but I can still get that milestone value from it. So I can open this up, see what's in our design phase, who is it assigned to, what phase, what step is it in, what list is it in, client review, just review internally. So this isn't ready. Maybe this is ready for client review. Let's go ahead and move that right here. So now we're scalably, instead of going to our project and every milestone screen and doing all of this, now we can kind of just go project by project. Let's go to that product development project, roll this down, open it up and say, we're in the middle of this sprint. This one's done and this one's done. And we're seeing kind of both of these Gantt move at once, both the individual milestone and the master project percentage. So it's a really large scale way of viewing what's going on. Great way of reporting it. We can actually bring out a report right here. Okay, so this is all project based, right? These are based around milestone health, propelled by the tasks. But if we want more task level insights, maybe you're not using milestones in all these tasks like we mentioned earlier. That's where we're going to start to use a couple of these other tools. So let's take a look at workloads, because this is going to break out what's assigned to who on my task and when's it due by. And now I can go across everyone on my team and see what do we have assigned to them. So Jeff has a bunch that's overdue, that's not yet complete, but he doesn't have anything coming up. So I'm hoping when Jeff gets these overdue tasks complete, we can bring some new ones down for him to work on. Emily's actually sharing those tasks. So we can actually kind of get some insight a little bit further in our planning here to have a good sense of when everything is going to be done by. I can actually bring down a report here as well of all the tasks that have been completed across my workspace. And this is kind of our master report. This is going to say what project was that task in, which task list was that task in, who was it assigned to, was there time tracked on it, which is not something we've covered today, but was there time tracked on it, who completed that task. So this is our master report on a task level. We also have all tasks. So this is, if overview is kind of our timeline captain's chair, all tasks is our task level captain's chair. Similar to workloads because it gives a lot of those insights. Similar, like here are those overdue tasks that we saw on the Gantt level on workloads, but all tasks helps us look a little bit further down our task load with ease. So I can actually get out to like July and September versus having to scroll months and months on a horizontal axis like we would have to on workload. So this is maybe a better way to look at the totality of what we need to do, especially if you're a team that plans far in advance. You can also control the scope of which tasks or which projects, even portfolios you're looking at. So if you want to go one portfolio at a time to go through these, if you want to go one project at a time, if you want to pluck out random projects from random portfolios, you can control that parameter. Just to be clear, everything we're seeing up here in these cross-project views is just an aggregation of what I could normally find on a project level. So if I'm not invited to a project in my workspace, I won't see it on any of these cross-project tools as well. This is just going to help me see what I could normally see in more scalable ways. Which brings me to my last point, probably the most beloved screen in Nifty is my tasks. As the name implies, this is what I need to worry about. So about 80% of our users spend most of their day here because they come in and say, okay, this is overdue. This is what I have to do later in the week and do even later in the year. Sorry, February 3rd, 7th, so on and so forth. And if I don't have anything, if these tasks, like here's a bunch I'm assigned to, but they don't have a due date, this just says unscheduled. So we'll find these at the bottom. Another thing that's worth covering here is that, and we didn't talk about it too much, but on the task level, we can add tags. So we can say, we can create custom tags. Nifty actually offers a few tags right out of the box. So if you want to say this is a high priority task, we can actually give a few tasks here. Let's use that bulk select. We'll say these are all high priority. If I want to create a whole nother one, let's create a webinar. Let's create a webinar tag. Okay, so here's webinar. There it is. So now we can start to filter these tasks. If I want to say, all right, what are all of my high priority tasks? Or what are all of my webinar tasks? There it is. Or let's kind of go back to high priority. I think that one is a strong use case. So high priority tasks assigned to Carlos. 2 are overdue. They're high priority. This is where Carlos needs to start his workday, right? So between the per project level where we can get kind of micro level management, but also more of a collaboration, right? Like sharing those files, creating docs, that's going to happen on the project level, but we can still reference some of that on this cross project level. So if someone leaves feedback on one of our designs on a task, I can still access that from my tasks. If I want to jump into that project to get a little bit more insight, I can do that. We can see where our entire organization's health stands across all of our milestones because we've tied tasks to them when appropriate to get a sense of all of our project's health. And if they're risk indicators, this is going to turn into a blood red if it's overdue, and then we'll know that we need to jump on it. And we can also see when people have maybe a lot of tasks, maybe the reason we don't have a new task because Jeff still has a lot overdue here. So this is a good way to kind of understand resource bottlenecks. Like, is someone going to be available at the end of the month? Well, looks like us three are, but David is maybe a little bit busy. So anything that we want to give him a little bit earlier in the month. A couple more points I want to make, and then I'm going to try to hammer out a couple more of these questions that have popped up. We have a cross-project search. So first of all, these are our hotkeys. If you just want to like create a task or a milestone or a document, you use these key commands, and that will allow you to do it. But also if I want to search for a specific document, I think, let's say like specs. My guess is we have a specs document in here somewhere. And these are all the different types of things we can search, right? So project discussion, direct messages, comments. I'm going to go to docs, and okay, we have a bunch of different types of specification docs in different projects. So these three are in Agile, Scrum development. So if you know that thing exists, you don't necessarily want to go to the project. This is another fast way to get there. Similarly, we have that on the project level. If we have all these portfolios with all these projects, but I know I want to go to that client website we were building before. And here it is, portfolio, webinar portfolio. So we have a lot of client tasks, but if we say client website, suddenly that's the only one standing. So that's another way to quickly get to where you want to go within your workspace. Another thing worth noting, and I think I'm in the minority here using our light mode. If you want to access dark mode and you haven't turned it on during onboarding, you drop this down and you switch to dark mode. And this is how you will bring out that dark mode. So that was really what I was hoping to cover. Thanks so much for joining.